What's up? I'm Miles Best, journalist, t-shirt enthusiast, and host of Above the Noise. Now, I voted in pretty much every election since I turned 18. I remember my great-grandparents' house being a polling place, and I used to love to be the one to pass out the little I voted stickers to folks when I was a kid. But now that I'm grown, I know the process can sometimes be way too complicated, which could discourage people from voting in the first place. In 2016, my polling place changed and I ended up having to drive to 3 different locations before I could even get into the voting booth. It was a pain in the butt. And voting is supposed to be the cornerstone of a healthy democracy. But why does the US fall so far behind other developed nations when it comes to voter turnout? In 2016, only about 61% of people who could vote actually voted, compared to Belgium, which had an 87.2% turnout rate in 2014, Turkey had 84.3% in 2015, and Sweden's was 82.5% in 2014. Now, when folks talk to young people and other underrepresented groups, it's always, go out and vote if you want your voices heard, which is true, but a tedious registration process and a wide range of laws that vary across the country aimed at suppressing turnout that target low-income folks, students, disabled folks, seniors, and communities of color with laws that include strict voter ID, voter purges, and poll closures, it can greatly impact turnout. So it has me wondering, is voting too hard in the US? There's been tactics that have been used to get in the way of people voting since America's birth. When we first started voting as a nation, only land-owning white men could vote. And the fight to get as many people the right to vote was a hard-fought battle that culminated in the passing of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. But that was a long time ago, right? Nearly everyone can vote now, so what's going on? I've heard a lot of criticisms aimed at young people that Americans are too lazy or too apathetic to vote. But is that true? There's lots of examples of how voting just isn't that easy for certain communities, especially young voters, people of color, people in rural communities, or people with disabilities. So there was this 2014 report that was basically like, this is how elections should go. And in the report, they were saying that no citizen should wait more than 30 minutes to vote. But when you look at the 2018 primaries, Black and Latino voters ended up having to wait like 45 minutes longer than white voters. Some of that is because people of color may live in areas where there are fewer resources and limited polling sites. Now, when the Voters' Rights Act passed in 1965, there was provisions in the law that basically said if you are a state that has a history of discrimination, you got to get federal approval and get it sealed off before you make a law. That was because some states just needed a little push, a little more oomph to make sure that they protected the rights of Black and brown voters. But in 2013, the Supreme Court rolled back that provision, saying there was rising voter turnout rates in minority neighborhoods. Basically, they said we didn't need it anymore. Almost immediately after that decision was made, states with a history of discriminatory practices, including Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama, all enforced photo ID laws that were previously not allowed under the provision. Now, there are folks in favor of the law that are constantly talking about, these policies help us fight against voter fraud. They protect us and, make elections safer. But then, if you look at this report from the Brennan Center, they listed only like 4 documented cases of voter fraud in the 2016 election. There's even the Heritage Foundation, which is, a conservative organization, and they found just under 1,300 documented cases of voter fraud in the last 40 years. 40 years. Now that might sound like a lot, but that's billions of votes. 1,300 cases, billions of votes. And most of them were charges of registration fraud or buying votes, not even like direct fraud like in the polls on election day. And this is particularly alarming when you think about 11% of eligible voters, and this is mainly a lot of young people and folks in these poor rural neighborhoods, they don't have government issued photo IDs. That's almost 21 million people who likely can't vote. Like I said before, voting is supposed to be a pillar of a healthy democracy. But we're here in the US where we claim to be this democracy powerhouse, but we're 26th out of 32 developed democracies when it comes to the percentage of voting age people who actually participate in their civic duty and go to the polls. But the countries ahead of America make voting a lot easier for their citizens. For example, Belgium is one of 22 countries with compulsory voting, which basically means it's mandatory for folks 18 and over to vote, or they could potentially face a fine or some type of penalty. The idea is that voting is more than a right. It's a civic obligation. Like, it's your job. Now, let's also talk about registering to vote, another hurdle here in the US. Countries like Sweden and Germany, they automatically register their citizens to vote as soon as they turn 18, something that only 17 states and the District of Columbia offer here in the US. Is voting too hard in the US?
Voting is way too hard in the United States, especially for young people.
That's Laura Brill, a lawyer who specializes in voting rights. I spoke with her to learn more about how and why the US is so different when it comes to making voting easy.
We do not invite people in a welcoming way to enter our democracy and to participate. And there's hurdles in schools, there's hurdles in our election laws, and it all ends up looking like low youth turnout over the years.
Most states have laws requesting or requiring voters to show some form of identification at the polls. The rest use other methods to verify the identity of their voters. But the list of what's an acceptable ID varies from state to state. I remember when I was doing research for this, in Texas, they accept gun licenses as a form of ID, but not student IDs. So there's a wide variation from state to state. As I said before, we've seen the ridiculously long lines that wrap around buildings and cause people to wait hours and hours. That's usually because of polling closures. Between 2012 and 2018, states and counties with a history of discrimination closed nearly 1,700 polling places. Then we've got something called voter purging. It's when election officials do maintenance and clean up the voter list by deleting the names of ineligible voters because they moved out of state, or they didn't vote in a certain number of elections, or they passed away. But the issue with that is that hundreds of thousands of people, they get their names deleted without any type of notice. And then when they go to show up to the polls to vote, they see that their names are missing, and then they can't cast a ballot. But with all these barriers, there has to be ways for folks to fight it, right? I mean, people want to vote, but there's so many laws and hurdles that get in the way of the process that it can make it less engaging. So how do we push back and fight against it?
I would say first is pre-registration, because having young people be able to organize in high schools for 2 years and to get everybody registered so that when they're 18 they actually can vote, that's a huge benefit. The other one that we haven't talked about yet is online voter registration, which is also a great, many states have it, and again, it's not just blue states that have it. The states are adopting it because it's cheaper and easier to use. And I would say combining that with good civics education, so people, young people understand how they can have a voice and why their voice matters, and how they can organize those, that and the relationship between voting and their lives.
Like, if you could directly talk to young people and make that case about why they shouldn't, give in to that apathy or that frustration about the voting process, what would you say?
We're in a vicious cycle when young people don't vote, because if young people don't turn out, then the politicians say, well, young people don't turn out. Why should I talk to young people about the issues that they care about? And, the issues are issues that all of us should care about.
But now we want to know what you think. Should voting in the US be made easier across the board? Or do you think it's fine as is and we should continue to allow states to make their own rules? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Oh, and before you go, PBS Digital Studios and Above the Noise want to hear from you. We do a survey every year that helps us make more of the stuff that you want to see. You even get to vote on potential new shows. Take a survey in the link in the description below and let them know that Above the Noise is definitely your favorite show. As always, I'm your host, Miles Best. Till next time, y'all. Peace out.